The rain came down like bullets on the hood of the Crown Vic, each drop exploding into 1,000 smaller pieces against the windshield. The wipers fought a losing battle, smearing the neon glow of liquor store signs and pawn shops across the glass in streaks of red and blue and sick yellow-green. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the city blur past through water and light. Sergeant Marcus Bull Vance drove with one hand on the wheel, the other wrapped around a cup of gas station coffee that had gone cold 3 hours ago. He was a wall of a man, 250 pounds of muscle gone soft at the edges, with a shaved head that reflected the dashboard lights and a scar over his left eye that he claimed came from a knife fight in '09. His cologne was cheap and aggressive, the kind that tried too hard to cover the smell of cigarettes and sweat. It mixed with the stale coffee and created an atmosphere that made the patrol car feel smaller than it was. We'd been riding together for 6 weeks, 6 weeks of watching, 6 weeks of listening, 6 weeks of pretending I was something I wasn't. "You're quiet tonight, Miller," Vance said, his voice like gravel in a blender. He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed on the street, always hunting. "Problem?" "No problem, Sarge," I said, keeping my voice young, eager. "Just taking it all in." He grunted. It might have been approval. With Vance, it was hard to tell. The radio spat static and voices, units calling in locations, dispatchers sending cars to domestics in 415s, the soundtrack of the night shift. Vance reached over and turned the volume down until it was just background noise, white noise to fill the silence between us. "You know what your problem is, kid?" he asked. I didn't answer. I'd learned that when Vance asked a question, he didn't actually want a response. He wanted an audience. "You think too much," he continued. "I see it in your eyes. You're always thinking, always questioning. That's going to get you killed out here." "Yes, Sarge," I said. "The academy filled your head with rules and regulations and constitutional rights," Vance said, taking a sip of his cold coffee and grimacing. "But they didn't teach you the most important lesson." "What's that?" He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. How to survive. We turned onto Mercer Street, deep in the heart of the South District where the streetlights were either shot out or flickering their last. The buildings here leaned into each other like drunks at closing time, all peeling paint and broken windows covered with plywood. This was the kind of neighborhood where people didn't call the cops. They just dealt with their problems themselves, which made it perfect hunting ground for predators with badges. Vance sat up straighter, his predator instincts kicking in. I felt it too, that shift in the air when a cop spots something. A silver Honda Civic, maybe 10 years old, rolling through a stop sign half a block ahead. "There we go," Vance muttered. "You see that?" "Ran the stop sign," I said. "Damn right he did." Vance flipped on the lights. The Civic's brake lights flared red and the car pulled over to the curb in front of a shuttered bodega with bars on the windows. Vance eased the Crown Vic in behind it, angling so the headlights illuminated the back of the suspect vehicle. The rain hammered down harder, turning the world into a watercolor painting that bled at the edges. "Let me do the talking," Vance said. "You just watch and learn." I nodded like an obedient rookie should, but my left hand drifted to my ribs, pressing lightly against the fabric of my uniform shirt. Underneath, taped to my skin with medical adhesive that left welts and made me itch, was a digital recorder no bigger than a book of matches. It was recording every word. We stepped out into the downpour. The rain was cold, soaking through my uniform in seconds. Vance walked toward the driver's side window with the confidence of a man who owned the street, his flashlight held high, his other hand resting on his service weapon. I took position at the passenger side, my own flashlight illuminating the interior of the Civic. The driver was a kid, 17, maybe 18 at most. Hispanic, thin, wearing a hoodie that was 2 sizes too big. His hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, knuckles white with fear. In the passenger seat sat a backpack and a Taco Bell bag with grease stains spreading across the paper. "License and registration," Vance barked. The kid fumbled with his wallet, hands shaking so hard he dropped it twice. I'm sorry, officer, I didn't see the stop sign. The rain." "I didn't ask for excuses," Vance snapped. "License, now!" The kid finally managed to extract his license and handed it over with a trembling hand. His name was Carlos Mendez. The address put him in the East District, far from here. Vance studied the license with his flashlight, taking his time, letting the tension build. "Step out of the vehicle," Vance ordered. But I didn't. Out, now! Carlos climbed out into the rain, and I watched his face in the glow of my flashlight. This wasn't defiance. This wasn't guilt. This was pure terror, the kind of fear that comes from knowing you're powerless, that nothing you say or do will matter. I'd seen that look before, too many times. Vance walked the kid to the back of the Civic, positioning him in the glare of the Crown Vic's headlights. You got anything illegal in that car, Carlos? Drugs? Weapons? Anything I should know about? No, sir, nothing, I swear. You mind if I search it? Carlos hesitated. He knew his rights. He could say no, but he also knew what happened to kids who said no to cops in neighborhoods like this. They found reasons. They always found reasons. I guess that's okay, Carlos whispered. Vance smiled. Good answer. I stayed with Carlos while Vance conducted the search. The rain plastered the kid's hair to his forehead, and his hoodie clung to his skinny frame. He was shivering, from cold or fear, I couldn't tell. Probably both. Through the car windows, I watched Vance work. He went through the glove compartment, under the seats, through the backpack. He was thorough, professional. He checked the trunk, lifted the spare tire, even pulled the floor mats. Nothing, because there was nothing to find. Carlos Mendez was exactly what he looked like, a scared kid who ran a stop sign in the rain while driving home from his shift at Taco Bell. Vance straightened up, his expression unreadable in the darkness. Then he reached into his vest pocket, the small one on the left side, and pulled something out. His body blocked my view for just a moment, but I saw enough. A small plastic baggie, white powder inside, maybe 2 grams. Vance bent down beside the driver's seat, his flashlight illuminating the space under the seat. When he stood up, he was holding the baggie in his gloved hand. Well, 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 Vance called out. What do we have here? Carlos's eyes went wide. What? No, that's not mine. I don't... Cocaine, Vance said, holding the bag up to the light. Found it under your driver's seat. You want to change your story about having nothing illegal in your car? That's not mine, Carlos's voice cracked. I've never seen that before. You have to believe me. Turn around, Vance ordered. Hands behind your back. I stood there in the rain, my flashlight still pointed at Carlos's face, and I watched the moment his world ended. His future, whatever plans he had, whatever dreams his mother had for him, all of it dissolved in the downpour like smoke. 5 years minimum for possession with that amount, maybe more if Vance added intent to distribute, all because Bull Vance needed to pad his arrest numbers, or maybe just because he could. Vance walked Carlos to the Crown Vic and put him in the back seat. The kid was crying now, pleading, saying over and over that it wasn't his, that someone planted it, that this wasn't fair. But nobody was listening. Vance slammed the door and turned to me. We stood there in the rain, blue and red lights painting his face in alternating colors. He was smiling. Then he winked. Welcome to the real world, kid, Vance said, his voice barely audible over the storm. We don't find crime. We make sure it happens. He walked past me toward the driver's side, leaving me standing there in the rain beside Carlos's Civic with its door still hanging open and its future owner sobbing in the back of our patrol car. I was supposed to be shocked. I was supposed to be horrified, maybe even conflicted about what I'd just witnessed. A rookie cop seeing corruption for the first time. That's what Bull Vance expected to see on my face. So I gave him what he expected. I swallowed hard, let my eyes go a little wide, and nodded slowly like a man whose worldview had just been shattered. But inside, I was calm, clinical, detached, because I wasn't a rookie. I was Detective James Miller, Internal Affairs Division, 8 years on the job. And for the past 6 weeks, I'd been documenting every crime, every bribe, every planted piece of evidence that Sergeant Marcus Vance had committed. Badge number 2847, license plate 7, Charlie 92, timestamp 22:47 hours, location, Mercer Street and 5th, evidence planted, approximately 2 grams of cocaine, packaged in a clear plastic baggie with a zip seal. Victim, Carlos Mendez, age 17. I memorized every detail. The recorder taped to my ribs captured every word, and Bull Vance had no idea. I climbed back into the Crown Vic, water dripping from my uniform onto the seat. Vance was already filling out the arrest report, his handwriting surprisingly neat for a man with hands like ham hocks. You good? He asked without looking up. Yeah, I said. My voice sounded hollow. Perfect. "I'm good, Sarge." "Don't worry, you get used to it." He ripped the carbon copy from the report pad and tucked it into his clipboard. "The brass love good arrest numbers. Carlos back there, he's going to help both our careers." He started the engine and pulled away from the curb, leaving the Civic sitting there in the rain with its door still open, a monument to injustice on a street that had seen too many. In the rearview mirror, I could see Carlos's face pressed against the cage that separated the back seat from the front. His eyes met mine for just a moment, desperate, pleading, searching for something human in the men who'd just destroyed his life. I looked away. I had to. Because if I let myself feel what that kid was feeling, if I let myself acknowledge the horror of what Bull Vance did to innocent people every single day, I wouldn't be able to finish this job. And I was so close, so damn close. Vance reached over and turned the radio back up. The dispatcher was sending a unit to a domestic on Halstead. The night shift rolled on, indifferent to one more kid whose life didn't matter to men who'd forgotten why they put on the badge in the first place. "You're going to do just fine, Miller," Vance said. He was smiling again. "Just fine." I nodded and stared out the window at the city bleeding past in the rain. 6 weeks down. How much longer could I keep doing this before the weight of it crushed me? Or worse, before Bull Vance figured out who I really was? 6 months earlier, the basement of police headquarters smelled like stale cigarettes, burnt coffee, and secrets that would never see daylight. I walked down the corridor with fluorescent lights flickering overhead, each one buzzing like a dying insect. The walls were painted industrial beige, the color of bureaucracy and broken promises, and the floor tiles were cracked linoleum that had probably been installed sometime during the Reagan administration. Internal affairs, the rat squad, the place where cop careers came to die. Nobody wanted to be here. Not the cops being investigated, and definitely not the cops doing the investigating. IA officers were pariahs in every precinct, ghosts at every police barbecue, the names whispered with contempt in every locker room across the city. But I'd been here for 8 years, and I'd stopped caring what other cops thought of me a long time ago. The door at the end of the hall had no nameplate, just a number. B17. I knocked twice. Not too hard, not too soft. The kind of knock that said you belonged but knew better than to be presumptuous. "Come," a voice called from inside. I turned the handle and stepped into Captain Robert Donnelly's office. The office was small, cramped, and dark despite the desk lamp throwing a pool of yellow light across scattered files and paperwork. The Venetian blinds were drawn, slicing what little natural light managed to penetrate this deep into the building's bowels, into thin horizontal lines across the opposite wall. A radiator hissed in the corner, making the room feel like a pressure cooker. Donnelly sat behind his desk, a cigarette dangling from his lips even though smoking had been banned in city buildings for 15 years. He was in his late 50s, with iron gray hair cut military short, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite by someone who'd run out of patience halfway through. His eyes were the color of winter, cold, gray, and unforgiving. On his desk sat an ashtray overflowing with butts, a half-empty bottle of bourbon with 2 glasses, and a manila folder thick enough to be a phone book. "Close the door, Miller," Donnelly said, lighting a fresh cigarette from the ember of the old one, "and lock it." I did both. The lock clicked with a finality that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Sit," he ordered, gesturing to the chair across from him with his cigarette. I sat. The chair was old, the kind with a vinyl seat that stuck to your pants in summer and felt like ice in winter. Springs creaked under my weight. Donnelly reached for the bourbon and poured 2 fingers into each glass without asking if I wanted any. He slid one across the desk toward me. "You're not drinking?" I asked, noticing he made no move toward his own glass. "Not yet," Donnelly said. "I want you sober when I tell you what I'm about to tell you. You can get drunk after." That didn't sound promising. Donnelly opened the manila folder and pulled out a photograph. He turned it around so I could see it clearly in the lamplight. The photo showed a man in uniform, big, bald, with a scar over his left eye. He was smiling at the camera like he owned the world. Sergeant Marcus Bull Vance, badge number 2847, 15 years on the force, decorated, respected, a training officer responsible for shaping the next generation of cops. "What do you know about Vance?" Donnelly asked. "South District Patrol Sergeant," I said. "Good arrest record, trains rookies, his people are loyal to him." His people are owned by him, Donnelly corrected. He pulled out another photograph, this one showing Vance shaking hands with a known drug dealer outside a warehouse. Marcus Vance is the dirtiest cop in this city, and that's saying something. He spread more photos across the desk like a dealer laying down cards. Vance taking an envelope from a strip club owner. Vance standing over a handcuffed suspect, his boot on the man's neck. Vance loading bags of cash into the trunk of his personal vehicle, a Dodge Charger that patrol sergeants definitely couldn't afford on city salary. He runs a crew, Donnelly continued, tapping ash into the overflowing tray. 4 other officers, maybe more. We call them the Wolf Pack. They operate in South District, but their reach extends across half the city. They steal drug money. They take bribes. They plant evidence. They beat suspects. And they're very, very good at it. How long has this been going on? I asked. At least a decade, probably longer. Donnelly took a long drag from his cigarette, the ember glowing bright orange in the dim room. We've had 3 separate investigations into Vance over the years. All of them went nowhere. Witnesses recant. Evidence disappears. Officers refuse to talk. The blue wall, I said. Concrete reinforced with steel, Donnelly agreed. Vance has the loyalty of his crew, and his crew has leverage over dozens of other cops throughout the department. If you've been on the force more than 5 years, chances are you owe Vance a favor, or he knows something about you that you don't want known, or you looked the other way once when you should have spoken up. He's built himself a fortress. I picked up my glass and took a sip. The bourbon burned going down, cheap and harsh. So what's changed? Donnelly pulled out another photograph. This one showed a young man in civilian clothes, maybe 25, lying in a pool of blood on a sidewalk. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. 3 bullets in the chest. Jamal Davis, Donnelly said quietly. Age 26, no criminal record, college graduate, worked as a youth counselor in South District. 3 months ago, he witnessed Vance and 2 of his crew beating a teenager behind a liquor store. Davis pulled out his phone and started recording. Let me guess, I said. He didn't make it home. Shot 3 times. Witnesses said 2 men in hoodies ran up and opened fire, then fled on foot. No arrests, no suspects. Case is ice cold. Donnelly's jaw tightened. But I know it was Vance. I know it in my bones, and I'm done letting him operate with impunity. He pulled out one more item from the folder, a dossier with my name on it. Detective James Miller, 8 years with Internal Affairs, 43 successful investigations, 0 complaints, 0 compromises. You're one of the best investigators I have, Miller, Donnelly said, meeting my eyes. You're clean, you're smart, and you're patient. Most importantly, you're unknown. You've spent your entire career in IA, which means you've had minimal contact with patrol officers. Vance won't recognize you. I felt ice water settle into my stomach. You want me to go undercover? I want you to become someone else, Donnelly said. He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair, studying me through a haze of cigarette smoke. We're calling it Operation Blue Wall. We're going to scrub your IA history from the system. As far as anyone will know, you're a patrol officer who just transferred from the North District. Clean record, but nothing special. Eager, green enough to mold, the perfect rookie for a training officer like Vance. And then what? Then you ride with Vance. You watch him. You document everything. You wear a wire every single day. You infiltrate the wolf pack, gain their trust, and get me the evidence I need to put all of them away for 20 years. I stood up and walked to the window, pulling aside one of the Venetian blinds to look out at the parking lot. A few patrol cars sat under the harsh glow of sodium lights. Officers coming and going, starting shifts, ending them. Men and women who'd sworn an oath to protect and serve. Most of them kept that oath, but not all of them. You know what cops do to rats, Captain? I said without turning around. If Vance figures out who I really am, then we won't find your body, Donnelly finished. I'm not going to lie to you, Miller. This is the most dangerous assignment I can give you. You'll be alone out there. No backup, no safety net. If things go sideways, I can't protect you. If Vance or his crew get suspicious, you're done. Comforting. I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to give you the truth. Donnelly stood up and walked over to stand beside me. We both looked out at the parking lot. You can say no. I won't think less of you. Hell, I'd probably respect you more for having the good sense to walk away from a suicide mission. But, I asked, but if you say no, Vance keeps operating. The Wolfpack keeps stealing and planting evidence and beating suspects. And eventually they'll kill another Jamal Davis. And another, because that's what happens when corrupt cops believe they're untouchable. I let the blind fall back into place and turned to face Donnelly. In the yellow lamplight, he looked older than his years, worn down by decades of investigating cops who'd forgotten what the badge meant. "Why me?" I asked. "You've got other investigators, younger ones. Why not send someone with less to lose?" Donnelly walked back to his desk and stubbed out his cigarette. He picked up his glass of bourbon, the one he'd said he wouldn't drink until after, and downed it in one swallow. "You want the truth?" he asked. "Always. Because you understand what this job costs. Because you've seen what happens when good cops stay silent and bad cops run wild. And because—" He hesitated, then pulled out one more file from his desk drawer. This one was older, the edges worn. He opened it and turned it so I could see. The name on the file made my chest tighten. Detective First Grade Thomas Miller. My father. "I knew your old man," Donnelly said quietly. "He was a good cop, one of the best, but he worked South District back in '98, and he made the mistake of reporting his partner for taking bribes. You know what happened next." I knew. I'd lived it. "The Blue Wall closed ranks," I said, my voice flat. "They called him a rat. They planted evidence in his locker, 3 ounces of cocaine, said he was stealing from busts. IA investigated him instead of the crooked partner. He got fired, lost his pension, and died broken bitter 5 years later." "He died knowing he'd done the right thing," Donnelly corrected. "And he died hoping that one day the department would be better than the men who destroyed him." He closed the file and met my eyes. "You don't have to do this, Miller. But if you do, if you take down Vance and his wolf pack, you'll be doing what your father never got the chance to finish. You'll be proving that the badge matters more than the blue wall, that justice is worth more than loyalty to corrupt cops." I thought about my father. I thought about Jamal Davis. I thought about every innocent person who'd been brutalized by cops who twisted the badge into a weapon instead of a shield. I thought about Carlos Mendez, though I didn't know his name yet. I didn't know that in 6 months, I'd watch him cry in the back of a patrol car while his future dissolved in the rain. But I knew there were thousands like him, kids and men and women whose lives were destroyed by cops like Bull Vance, people who called for help and got a predator instead. I picked up the bourbon glass Donnelly had poured for me and drained it. The burn felt like absolution. "When do I start?" I asked. Donnelly smiled, a grim, tired smile that held no joy, only grim determination. "Right now." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a badge and ID card. The badge was gold, the number different from my IA shield. The ID showed my face but a different title. Officer James Miller, Patrol Division. "As of this moment, Detective James Miller no longer exists," Donnelly said. "Your IA records are sealed. Your personnel file has been scrubbed and replaced with a generic patrol officer history. You've been transferred from North District to South District as part of routine reassignment. Tomorrow, you report to South District Roll Call, where you'll be assigned to Sergeant Marcus Vance as his new training officer candidate." I picked up the badge. It felt heavier than it should have. Or maybe that was just the weight of what I was about to do. "You'll get your recording equipment tomorrow," Donnelly continued. "Micro recorder, transmitter, the works, state of the art. Battery lasts 12 hours and it's small enough to tape to your ribs under your uniform. But Miller," his voice went hard, "you cannot let Vance search you. You cannot let him pat you down. You cannot give him any reason to get suspicious. The moment he finds that wire, you're dead. Understood?" "One more thing." Donnelly opened the bourbon bottle and poured himself another drink. This time, he didn't offer me one. "When you're out there with Vance, you're going to see things that make you want to blow your cover. You're going to watch him hurt people, plant evidence, destroy lives, and you're going to have to smile and nod and play along." "I can handle it," I said. "Can you?" Donnelly's eyes bored into me. "Because the men who can't handle it, the ones who break cover and try to stop it, they're the ones who end up in the river. You have to be patient, Miller. You have to let Vance commit his crimes while you document everything. And when we finally move, when we finally bring down the hammer, it has to be overwhelming. It has to be airtight. We get one shot at this." I looked down at the badge in my hand. Officer James Miller. A lie made of metal and leather. But maybe, just maybe, a lie in service of the truth. My father used to say something, I said quietly. He said the badge is sacred. It's not just a piece of metal, it's a promise. A promise to stand between the innocent and those who do them harm, even when it costs you everything. Your father was right, Donnelly said. And they destroyed him for it. Which is why I'm going to finish what he started. I stood up and slipped the badge into my pocket. It sat there like a stone, pulling me down into water I might never surface from. Donnelly stood as well. He extended his hand and I shook it. His grip was iron. Good luck, Officer Miller, he said. And remember, if this goes bad, I'll deny this conversation ever happened. You're on your own out there. I know, I said. I walked to the door and unlocked it. My hand was on the handle when Donnelly spoke one last time. Miller? I looked back. Make your father proud. I stepped out of that office and into the corridor, leaving Detective James Miller behind. When I walked out of the basement and into the sunlight, I was someone else, a rookie cop named Miller, green, eager, ready to learn from a veteran like Sergeant Bull Vance, ready to smile while I documented every crime he committed, ready to nod while he destroyed innocent lives, ready to become exactly what the wolf pack needed me to be, right up until the moment I helped put them all in cages. 6 months from that moment, I'd be sitting in a patrol car in the rain, watching Bull Vance plant drugs on a 17-year-old kid named Carlos Mendez. 6 months from that moment, I'd be so deep undercover that sometimes I'd forget which version of me was real. But in that basement office, standing in the yellow light while Donnelly's cigarette smoke curled toward the ceiling, I made a choice. The badge was sacred. My father had believed it. He died believing it, and I was going to prove he was right, no matter what it cost. The next 3 weeks were an education in corruption. Every shift with Bull Vance was a masterclass in how to twist the badge into something unrecognizable, how to take an oath meant to protect people and weaponize it against them, how to turn the thin blue line into a noose. I documented everything. Week 1, the badge tax. We rolled up on a corner dealer named Trey, 23 years old, gold chain, baggy jeans, the uniform of street-level distribution. Vance didn't bother with the arrest. He just walked up, grabbed Trey by the collar, and dragged him into an alley where the security cameras couldn't see. I followed, my hand instinctively moving to my ribs where the recorder captured every word. How much you holding, Trey? Vance asked, slamming the dealer against a dumpster. Man, I ain't got nothing. Vance's fist caught him in the stomach. Trey doubled over, gasping. Let's try that again, Vance said calmly. How much? Trey pulled a roll of bills from his sock with shaking hands. Maybe $2 grand, rubber banded tight. Vance took it, counted off 500, and tossed it back. Badge tax, Vance explained to me as we walked back to the patrol car. We let him operate. He pays rent. Everybody wins. Except the families destroyed by the drugs Trey sold, except the rule of law, except everything the badge was supposed to represent. But I nodded like an eager student. Smart, Sarge, Vance grinned. You're learning. Week 2, the education continues. A domestic violence call on Fulton Street. The victim, a woman named Maria with a split lip and bruises around her neck, pointed to her boyfriend as the attacker. Open and shut case. But the boyfriend slipped Vance $200 bills while I was helping Maria to the ambulance. By the time I got back, Vance was filling out a report that said Maria started the fight, that she was drunk, that her boyfriend was defending himself. She's got priors for assault, Vance explained when I asked about it later. The boyfriend's clean. Who do you think the DA is going to believe? But she was the victim, I said carefully, playing the confused rookie. Kid, there are no victims in this neighborhood. Only people who got caught and people who didn't. He clapped me on the shoulder. You'll understand eventually. I understood perfectly. I understood that Bull Vance would let a woman beater walk free for $200. I understood that justice was for sale in South District and Vance was the auctioneer. The recorder captured his words, the case number, the boyfriend's name, everything I'd need to bury him. Week 3, free meals and silent partners. We ate lunch at DeMarco's Italian restaurant on 5th, a family place that smelled like garlic and marinara sauce. The owner, a nervous man named Sal with thinning hair and a stained apron, brought us plates piled high with pasta and breadsticks. On the house, officers, Sal said, wringing his hands. Appreciate it, Sal, Vance said, not looking up from his food. When we left, there was no check. There never was. I'd learned that Vance ate free at half the restaurants in South District. Protection money disguised as hospitality. The owners were too afraid to say no. Code violations are a bitch, Vance had explained the first time. Health inspectors, fire marshals, they can shut a place down in 24 hours if they wanted. Business owners know who to keep happy. I thought about my father, about how he'd always insisted on paying for his meals, even when owners offered them free. The badge doesn't entitle us to anything except the responsibility to do right, he used to say. But I wasn't my father. Not anymore. I was Officer Miller, the rookie who smiled and ate free pasta while his training officer collected tribute like a mob boss with a badge. The pattern was clear. Vance didn't just commit one type of crime. He was a one-man corruption industry. Theft, extortion, evidence planting, witness intimidation, assault. Every shift brought something new, some fresh horror to document and file away in my memory alongside the digital recordings. But the worst was yet to come. The apartment raid, week 3, day 5. The warrant was legitimate. A known dealer named Marcus Dice Williams was operating out of a second-floor apartment on Howell Street. Intel said he had weight, maybe a few kilos of cocaine, enough to justify a tactical entry. Vance, myself, and 2 other patrol officers hit the door at 5 a.m. Dice was still in bed when we dragged him out and cuffed him. He didn't resist. Guys like Dice knew better than to fight cops during a raid. Fighting was how you got shot. We tore the place apart. Standard search procedure, except nothing about this was standard. The other officers found the drugs, 2 kilos hidden in the kitchen ceiling. Good bust. Clean. But Vance found something else. In the bedroom closet, tucked behind a pile of sneakers that probably cost more than my monthly rent, was a shoebox. Nike, size 12. But it wasn't full of shoes. It was full of cash. Vance pulled off the lid and smiled. Stacks of bills, 20s, 50s, 100s, rubber-banded and organized. I'd seen enough drug money to estimate at a glance. $20,000, maybe more. Well, Vance said softly. Dice has been doing good business. He looked at the other officers. Clear the apartment. I need to process this evidence. They left without question. That should have been my first warning. The way they obeyed instantly. The way they didn't even glance at the shoebox. They knew what was about to happen. They'd seen it before. Vance set the shoebox on the bed and started counting. His fingers moved quickly, professionally. He separated the stacks into 2 piles, one significantly larger than the other. The larger pile went into his vest. The smaller pile, maybe 8,000, went back into the shoebox. Then he turned to me. "You see that closet?" Vance asked, gesturing. "We found $8,000, cash, drug money. You're going to log it into evidence when we get back to the station, understood?" I stared at the shoebox, at the pile that was half the size it had been 30 seconds ago, at the bulge in Vance's vest where $12,000 sat like a tumor. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. Clear, documented theft. The recorder was capturing every word, every rustle of cash, every detail I'd need to bury him. But Vance wasn't done. He peeled off $500 bills from his vest pile and held them out to me. "Buy yourself something nice, kid," Vance said. "This is hazard pay. We put our lives on the line every day, and the city pays us shit. This?" He gestured at the money in his vest. "This is what we deserve. This is what makes the job worth it." The bills hung in the air between us. $500. A fortune to a patrol officer making $38,000 a year. Probably a week's groceries, a car payment, maybe some breathing room. But it was poison. Blood money. Stolen from a criminal, yes, but stolen nonetheless. If I refused, Vance would know something was wrong. Rookies didn't turn down free money, especially not rookies who were supposed to be learning the ropes from a veteran like Bull Vance. If I took it, I became complicit. I became part of the corruption I was supposed to be exposing. My hand reached out. My fingers closed around the bills. They felt like they were burning through my skin. "Thanks, Sarge," I said, my voice steady despite the acid churning in my stomach. Vance grinned and clapped me on the shoulder. "That's my boy. You're one of us now, Miller. Welcome to the Wolf Pack." We logged the 8,000 into evidence at the station. I filled out the paperwork myself, my handwriting neat and precise. Officer Miller had just documented his first major drug seizure. The report made no mention of the 12,000 Vance had stolen, or the 500 he'd handed me like a tip. The recorder captured everything, but that didn't make me feel any cleaner. That night, after shift, I drove to a different precinct across town, one where nobody knew Officer Miller. I walked into the evidence room and logged the $500 with a case number tied to one of my old IA investigations. The clerk barely looked up. It would eventually make its way back into the system, back to where it belonged. But for now, it was documented, tracked, evidence of my participation in Vance's corruption, evidence I prayed would be seen as part of my cover, not proof that I'd gone native. The close call. Week 4, Day 2. We were parked in an alley behind a closed pawn shop, killing time before end of shift. The rain had started again. It always seemed to be raining in South District, and the patrol car smelled like wet uniforms and stale coffee. I'd been quiet for the last hour. Too quiet. The adrenaline from the raid was wearing off, and in its place came the weight of what I was doing. The lies, the stolen money, the recorder taped to my ribs like a second heart, beating evidence against a man who could kill me if he discovered the truth. Vance noticed. "You've been acting weird, Miller," Vance said, his voice cutting through the sound of rain. "You barely said 2 words during the last stop." "Just tired, Sarge," I said, keeping my eyes forward. "Bullshit." Vance turned in his seat to face me fully. "You've been sweating since we left Dice's apartment. You keep touching your ribs." His eyes narrowed. "You wearing a wire, Miller? You look nervous." Time stopped. My mouth went dry. My hand, which had unconsciously been pressed against the recorder, froze in place. Vance's eyes were locked on me, cold and calculating. A predator evaluating prey. His right hand drifted toward his service weapon, casual but deliberate. This was it. The moment Donnelly warned me about. The moment where one wrong word, one tell, one flicker of fear in the wrong direction meant I'd end up in the river with a bullet in my head. I forced myself to laugh. It came out shaky, which was perfect, exactly how a scared rookie would sound. "A wire?" "Jesus, Sarge, no, I'm not." I let my voice crack. "I'm scared of IA finding out about the money. What if they audit the evidence? What if someone sees me spending $500 I didn't have last week? What if—" "Stop," Vance ordered. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. A real laugh, warm and almost paternal. "Kid, relax. You think you're the first cop to take a little hazard pay? IA doesn't give a shit about $500. They're looking for the big fish, guys moving kilos, running protection rackets. Small-timers like us, we're invisible." "But what if—" "Miller." Vance's voice went firm. "Listen to me. The blue wall protects its own. You're one of us now. That means IA can't touch you. You understand? We cover for each other. That's the deal." I nodded, letting relief flood my face. Okay, yeah. Sorry, Sarge. First time I've ever, First time's always the hardest," Vance said, settling back into his seat. "But it gets easier. Trust me." He started the engine. "Come on, let's get you home. You need sleep." As we pulled out of the alley, I let my hand drop from my ribs. The recorder was still there, still running, still capturing every word. That had been close. Too close. But I'd survived. I'd talked my way out of it using the exact excuse that would make sense to a corrupt cop. Fear of getting caught, not guilt over the crime itself. Vance bought it because it fit his worldview, because in his mind, there were no good cops and bad cops. There were only smart cops who took what they could get, and stupid cops who played by rules that nobody else followed. He'd never suspect that the nervous rookie sitting beside him was actually a detective with 8 years of experience in taking down dirty cops just like him. 4 weeks down. The Wolfpack was starting to trust me. Vance was starting to see me as an investment, a young cop he could mold into another soldier for his corrupt empire, which meant I was exactly where I needed to be. But every day, the weight got heavier. Every crime I witnessed and couldn't stop, every victim I had to walk away from, every dollar of stolen money I had to touch to maintain my cover. My father had died believing the badge was sacred, and I was drowning in filth trying to prove he was right. The parking garage was empty at 2 a.m., just concrete pillars and shadows and the distant hum of the city that never really slept. I'd parked on the 3rd level, far from the security cameras, in a corner where the overhead lights had burned out months ago. Captain Donnelly's sedan pulled in beside me. No lights, engine quiet. He stepped out looking older than I remembered, more worn down. 6 weeks of this operation had aged both of us. "You're late," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. Vance wanted to grab food after shift. I couldn't say no without raising suspicion. I pulled the micro-recorder from my ribs, the same spot I'd been taping it for 6 weeks, and handed it over. The adhesive had left my skin raw and bleeding in places. Today's recordings. He shook down 3 businesses, planted evidence on a DUI stop, and took a $2,000 bribe from a brothel on Stark Street. Donnelly plugged the recorder into a tablet and pulled up the files. His face was illuminated by the blue glow as he scrolled through the documented crimes. 6 weeks of corruption, organized and time-stamped. "This is good," Donnelly said finally. "Better than good. We have enough to charge Vance with racketeering, evidence tampering, theft, extortion, the works. We could move on him tomorrow." "But?" I asked because I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "But I want the whole wolf pack, not just Vance." Donnelly looked up from the tablet. "You've documented Vance's crimes, but we need him to involve the others in something big. Something so damning that none of them can claim they didn't know what was happening." "What did you have in mind?" Donnelly smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "We're going to rob a stash house." He pulled out a floor plan, a 2-story house in South District, windows marked, entry points highlighted. 1247 Riverside Drive. We've been using it for undercover operations for years. As of tomorrow, it's going to be a cartel stash house holding $500,000 in cash. "Except it won't be real cartel money," I said. "Asset forfeiture funds, already logged and accounted for. We'll stage it to look like a counting operation. Money on the table, scales, the whole setup. We'll have Agent Lopez from DEA playing the role of the dealer. He's done undercover work with cartels before. He can sell it." "And I feed the intel to Vance," I finished. "Exactly. You tell him you heard about it from a CI. Big score, $500,000, minimal security. Vance won't be able to resist and he'll want backup for something this big. He'll bring his crew." I walked to the edge of the parking garage and looked out at South District stretched below, a grid of lights and shadows where Bull Vance had operated with impunity for over a decade, where my father had tried to do the right thing and been destroyed for it. "When we hit that house, what happens to Lopez?" I asked. "SWAT will be staged in the house next door and in a panel van down the block. The moment Vance and his crew commit to the theft, we move. 3 seconds, maybe 4, Lopez will be fine." "And if something goes wrong? If Vance decides to eliminate witnesses?" Donnelly's silence told me everything. This was the risk. The moment where everything could go sideways, where an undercover agent could die, where I could die. "Lopez volunteered," Donnelly said finally. "He knows the stakes, so do you." I turned back to face him. "When?" "Tomorrow night. We'll plant the intel in the morning. Anonymous tip from a CI that the stash house is operational. You overhear it and bring it to Vance. By tomorrow night, this is over, one way or another." I drove home that night but didn't sleep. I sat in my apartment with the lights off, cleaning my service weapon and thinking about my father, wondering if he'd be proud of what I was about to do or horrified that I'd spent 6 weeks becoming everything he'd hated just to take down men like Vance. The line between undercover and complicit was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. The next day, planting the seed. I found Vance in the break room, pouring coffee that looked like motor oil into a stained mug. He nodded when he saw me. "Ready for another shift, Miller?" "Actually, Sarge, I wanted to ask you about something." I kept my voice low, conspiratorial. "You remember that CI I've been developing, the kid who hangs around the Riverside projects?" Vance's interest sharpened. "The one who gave us that tip about the corner dealer last week?" "Yeah, he reached out this morning. Says there's a stash house on Riverside Drive. Big operation, cartel money. He's talking $500,000, maybe more. Counting operation, minimal security." I watched the gears turn behind Vance's eyes. $500,000, enough to retire, enough to disappear, enough to make every risk worth it. "Your CI reliable?" Vance asked carefully. "He's been solid so far. But Sarge, I don't know if we should, that's a lot of money. What if what? Vance's voice was sharp. "What if we do our jobs and seize a major drug operation? That's exactly what we should be doing, Officer Miller." The way he said it, Officer Miller, made it clear. This wasn't about the job. This was about the score. "Get me the address," Vance ordered. "And don't mention this to anyone else. Understood? This is our bust." "Yes, Sarge." I walked to the locker room and sent a single text message to a burned phone number. He took the bait. Donnelly's response came 10 seconds later. Stand by. Operation Blue Wall is go. That night, the drive. We rolled out at 10 p.m. Vance driving, me riding shotgun. He'd called in 2 other members of his crew, Officers Bradley and Simmons, both dirty, both part of the wolf pack. They followed in a second patrol car, lights off, ghosts in the darkness. Vance was different tonight, focused, energized. His hands gripped the steering wheel tight, and I could see the hunger in his eyes every time we passed under a streetlight. "This is it, kid," Vance said, his voice almost reverent. "This is the retirement fund. We do this right. We're set for life. No more bullshit patrols. No more scraping by on city salary. This is the big one." "What about the others?" I asked, playing the nervous rookie. "Bradley and Simmons. They're getting a cut. Equal shares. That's how the Wolfpack operates. We're brothers, Miller. We take care of our own." He glanced at me. "You're one of us now. After tonight, you're fully vested, part of the family. The family. The Blue Wall, the Brotherhood, all the names corrupt cops used to justify turning the badge into a criminal enterprise. My father had refused to be part of that family. It had killed him. And tonight, I was going to burn it all down." We pulled up 2 blocks from 1247 Riverside Drive and killed the lights. Bradley and Simmons parked behind us. All 4 of us gathered in the rain, checking weapons, pulling on gloves. "Here's the play," Vance said, rain streaming down his face. "Fast and quiet. We go in hard, secure the location, neutralize any threats. Miller, you're with me. Bradley, Simmons, you cover the exits. Anyone tries to run, you stop them. Understood?" They nodded. I nodded, all of us playing our roles. "Remember," Vance added, "this is a righteous bust. We're seizing drug money. Whatever we find in there, we earned it. The city doesn't pay us enough to risk our lives, so we're taking what we're owed." We moved through the rain like shadows. 4 cops about to commit armed robbery under the color of law. The house at 1247 Riverside was dark, except for a single light in the back room. Exactly as planned. We stacked up by the front door, Vance on point, me behind him, Bradley and Simmons covering. Vance looked back at me, grinned. "Ready to get rich, kid?" "Ready, Sarge." He raised his boot and kicked. The raid. "Police, don't move." We flooded into the house, weapons up, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The front room was empty, furniture covered in sheets, walls bare, but the light in the back room spilled through an open doorway. We moved toward it, Vance leading. The back room was exactly as Donnelly had promised. A folding table in the center covered with stacks of cash. Hundreds of them. More money than most people would see in a lifetime, laid out like bait for predators. And sitting behind the table, hands visible, expression calm, was Agent Lopez. Playing his role perfectly, a mid-level cartel operative caught in the act. "Don't move," Vance shouted, his weapon trained on Lopez. "Hands where I can see them." Lopez raised his hand slowly. "Easy, officer, easy, I'm not armed." Bradley and Simmons moved to secure the perimeter. I stayed with Vance, my heart hammering against the recorder taped to my ribs. Every word, every action, all of it documented. Vance approached the table, his eyes locked on the money. His weapon never wavered from Lopez, but I could see the greed consuming him. This was it. This was the moment he'd been building toward his entire corrupt career. "$500,000, Vance whispered. "Christ, it's really $500,000. He reached out with his free hand and grabbed a stack, thumbed through it. Real bills, real money. He looked at Bradley and Simmons, then at me. "Load it up," Vance ordered. "All of it. We're taking it." "What about him?" Bradley asked, gesturing at Lopez with his weapon. Vance stared at Lopez for a long moment. I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. The witness. The liability. The one person who could identify them, and I knew, with absolute certainty, what Vance was about to do. Vance reached down to his ankle holster and pulled out a small revolver, not his service weapon. This was older, scratched, serial number filed off. A drop gun. He walked toward me and held it out. "Shoot the dealer, kid. Make it look like he pulled on us. Earn your stripe." Time crystallized. This was the moment, the point of no return. I took the drop gun from Vance's hand. The metal was cold, heavy with the weight of every life Vance had destroyed with planted evidence and manufactured justifications. Lopez's eyes met mine. He was calm, professional, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He knew what was supposed to happen next. He knew SWAT was 3 seconds away, but 3 seconds was a lifetime. I raised the gun. Vance smiled. That's it, kid. Right in the chest. Make it clean. I pointed the weapon, but not at Lopez, at Vance. The reveal. I'm not a rookie, Sergeant, I said, my voice steady and cold. I'm not even a patrol cop. Vance's smile died. What the hell are you talking about? With my free hand, I ripped open my shirt, buttons scattered across the floor. The micro recorder sat taped to my ribs, its red light blinking. Detective James Miller, Internal Affairs Division. You're under arrest for corruption, theft, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Vance's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, realization, rage. His hand dropped toward his service weapon. Don't! I shouted, the drop gun trained on his center mass. But Vance was already moving, already drawing, already choosing violence over surrender because men like him never went quietly. Lopez erupted from the table, his hand pulling a badge from his pocket. DEA, drop your weapon! The back door blasted open and SWAT poured through like a black-clad flood. Red laser sights painted the room, dozens of them, turning Vance and his crew into constellations of targeting dots. Drop your weapons! Get on the ground! Bradley dropped his gun and raised his hands immediately. Simmons tried to run and got tackled by 3 SWAT operators before he made it 2 steps. But Vance, Bull Vance, the corrupt sergeant who'd operated with impunity for over a decade, Vance had his service weapon halfway out of the holster when a SWAT officer hit him with a taser. Vance went down hard, convulsing, and then SWAT was on him, wrenching his arms behind his back, cuffing him with the same handcuffs he'd used on Carlos Mendez and hundreds of others. You rat! Vance screamed, his face pressed against the floor, spit flying from his mouth. You're dead, Miller! You hear me? You're a dead man! I stood over him, still holding the drop gun, my shirt hanging open to expose the recorder that had captured everything. My name is Detective James Miller, I said quietly, and you're finished. Captain Donnelly walked through the front door, his face grim but satisfied. He looked at the money on the table, at Vance and his crew in handcuffs, at me, standing in the middle of it all like a ghost finally made real. Good work, Detective, Donnelly said. I nodded. I couldn't speak. 6 weeks of lies and corruption and pretending to be someone I wasn't, it all crashed down at once, leaving me hollow and exhausted. But it was over. The wolf pack was broken, and the badge, the sacred promise my father had died believing in, had been defended, even if it had nearly destroyed me in the process. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom and watched Bull Vance's world end. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution played the recordings. Every shakedown, every planted piece of evidence, every stolen dollar, every threat. My voice and Vance's voice, preserved in digital clarity, telling the story of corruption that had rotted South District from the inside out. Vance's attorney tried the entrapment defense, claimed I'd manipulated his client, claimed Vance was a decorated officer led astray by an IAA plant who'd encouraged illegal behavior. But the recordings didn't lie. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the forewoman stood and read the verdict with a steady voice that echoed through the silent courtroom. Guilty, on all counts: racketeering, evidence tampering, theft, conspiracy, assault, attempted murder. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Carr who'd spent 30 years on the bench, looked at Vance with something between disgust and pity. You were given a badge, Judge Carr said, a symbol of public trust, and you weaponized it against the people you swore to protect. You are a disgrace to law enforcement and a threat to civil society. Vance stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, his eyes empty. I hereby sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Bradley got 15 years. Simmons got 12. 2 other members of the Wolfpack who'd been swept up in the investigation got 10 years each. The newspapers called it the biggest police corruption case in the city's history. The mayor held a press conference praising Internal Affairs for its dedication to rooting out bad cops. The chief stood beside him and called me a hero. But heroes don't get rats left on their desk. 2 weeks after sentencing, I returned to work at IA headquarters expecting something. Gratitude, maybe. Recognition. Some acknowledgement that I'd spent 6 weeks in hell to take down a corruption ring that had operated for over a decade. Instead, I got silence. The other detectives didn't meet my eyes in the hallway. The patrol officers I passed in headquarters turned away. The break room went quiet when I walked in, conversations dying mid-sentence like I was a ghost. The blue wall had judged me, and I'd been found guilty. I opened my locker one morning and a dead rat fell out. Its neck was broken, its eyes clouded white. Someone had left it there overnight, a message as old as organized crime. This is what happens to rats. I stared at it for a long moment, then picked it up with a paper towel and threw it in the trash. No one admitted to leaving it. No one would. That was the point of the blue wall. It protected everyone and identified no one. Captain Donnelly called me into his office that afternoon. He looked tired, older, like the victory had cost him something fundamental. "How are you holding up, Miller?" he asked. "Fine," I lied. "That's bullshit, and we both know it," Donnelly poured 2 glasses of bourbon, the same bottle from 6 months ago, still sitting on his desk. "You did good work, great work. You took down a monster and his crew. The city is safer because of you." "But?" I asked. "But you're done as a field operative. Word's out that you're IA. Every cop in this city knows your face now. You'll never work undercover again. You'll never be trusted in a precinct. You're a pariah," I finished. "Yeah, I figured." Donnelly pushed a glass toward me. "I'm not going to lie to you. This is your life now. IA is home. You'll investigate dirty cops from behind a desk, review complaints, dig through paperwork. The glamorous work." His voice dripped with sarcasm. "Some guys can't handle it. They transfer out, take early retirement, or—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "Or they eat their gun." "What about you?" I asked. "How do you handle it?" Donnelly took a long drink, draining half his glass. "I remember why I started. I remember that for every bull Vance we take down, there are 100 good cops trying to do the right thing. I remember that the badge means something, even if some people forget." I picked up my glass but didn't drink. My father used to say the badge was sacred, that it was a promise to stand between the innocent and those who'd hurt them, no matter the cost. "Your father was right," Donnelly said quietly. "And he paid the price for believing it, just like you're paying now. Worth it?" Donnelly met my eyes. "You tell me. Carlos Mendez, the kid Vance planted drugs on that first night, his case was thrown out. He's in college now, studying engineering. Because of you, he has a future. Because of you, Vance can't destroy anyone else's life. So yeah, Miller, it was worth it." I stood and walked to the window. Outside, patrol cars rolled in and out of headquarters, cops starting shifts and ending them. Most of them were good people. Most of them believed in the oath they'd taken. But not all of them. And someone had to hunt the monsters hiding behind the badge. Someone had to be willing to be hated by other cops in order to protect the people those cops were supposed to serve. Someone had to stand in the gap between the ideal and the reality, between what the badge should mean and what some people twisted it into. "I'll stay," I said. "IA is where I belong." Donnelly nodded, unsurprised. "Then welcome home, Detective Miller. The ghost in the machine, the rat in the ranks, the cop who hunts cops." "The necessary evil," I added. "The necessary good," Donnelly corrected. "The final truth." I left Donnelly's office and walked through headquarters one more time. The stairs, the whispers, the turned backs, all of it familiar now, a uniform I'd wear for the rest of my career. My father had tried to fight corruption from the inside and been destroyed by the blue wall. He'd died broken and bitter, his reputation ruined, his belief in the badge shattered. But he'd been right about one thing: the badge was sacred. It was a promise, a commitment, a line between order and chaos. And when cops crossed that line, when they became the criminals they were supposed to stop, someone had to hold them accountable, even if it meant becoming an outcast, even if it meant being hated by the very people you were trying to protect, even if it meant carrying the weight of every dirty cop's crimes on your shoulders while the world called you a rat. I stood in the doorway of headquarters and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, another Bull Vance was operating. Another corrupt cop was planting evidence, stealing money, destroying lives, and I would find them, document their crimes, build the case, take them down. Because that's what IA does. We're the ghosts in the machine, the necessary evil that keeps the system from devouring itself. Some cops wear the badge with honor. Some cops hide behind it like a shield for their crimes. And some of us hunt the difference. There are cops, and there are criminals. The worst kind is the one who is both, the predator with a badge The wolf in uniform, the monster who uses public trust as a weapon. My father believed the badge was sacred. He died believing it. And I'd spent 6 weeks in hell proving he was right. The blue wall will never forgive me. Other cops will always see me as a traitor, a rat, someone who violated the unwritten code that says you never turn on your own. But they're wrong about one thing. Bull Vance and his wolf pack were never our own. They were criminals who stole the badge and twisted it into something unrecognizable. Taking them down wasn't betrayal. It was the job. I touched the badge on my belt, my real badge, the IA shield I'd carried for 8 years. It felt heavier than it used to, heavy with the weight of every case, every corrupt cop, every life destroyed by men who'd forgotten what the oath meant. But I'd carry it, for as long as it took, for as long as monsters wore badges and thought themselves untouchable. Because the badge demands honor. If you can't give it, take it off.